All right, so welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for the 8th edition of the Fireside Chat. My name is Garrett McLaughlin. For those of you who are new to this series, the Fireside Chat is a conversational webinar where we connect with some of the top professionals in the endurance community. This week, we have Eva Solomon, who is the founder and CEO of Epic Races, which is an endurance multi-sport race company in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Before we get started, let me cover a few housekeeping items. First, do us a favor and silence any technology around you, just to make sure you get the most from this chat. Second, I highly recommend asking questions. Of course, we will cover specific items that was outlined in the registration, but you're welcome to ask any question at any time to get the most from this chat. So feel free to drop a question in the chat box, which you should see at somewhere on your screen at any point throughout the chat. Lastly, if you cannot stay for the entire chat for whatever reason, or you just want to reflect back on this content at a later time, I will be sending the replay of this to you tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So make sure you check your email and especially look in the spam folder, since it can sometimes end up in there. So without further ado, Eva, thanks for joining us on the Fireside Chat. How's everything going today?
Oh, everything is going great, Garrett. Thanks. It's a lot better than at this time last week. We just finished up a weekend of racing, and it was our first race since 2019.
That's
so
awesome. It must have felt good.
It feels good. It feels really good. Yeah.
And now, so everyone knows you're down in Florida too right now. So I know we're getting a little snow tonight. And
yeah, that's what I heard. You know, when I left after such a beautiful weekend in Michigan, I was thinking, what am I doing? Because I love days like that in Michigan, where it's all cool in the morning, warms up during the day. And I was in Florida, but I hear it quickly changed, as it does.
I know.
So
I know, so unpredictable, but I guess that's what it's like up here. So
yeah.
As we get started here, do us a favor and give us a little bit about your background. I kind of stole this from the website here and put you up front and center. So tell us a little bit about you, and then we kind of go into Epic Races.
Sure. So I started Epic Races in 2009. Really started actually 2008. First race was 2009. And the reason I started it was because there was an absence of women's triathlon in Michigan. I'm originally from Michigan, grew up in Michigan, but lived in Allentown, Pennsylvania for quite a while, which was where I started participating in triathlons. And one of my favorite things out there, actually it wasn't specifically Allentown, but in the East, was the Danskin Women's Triathlon, which was a big deal back then. And I just loved it. It was my favorite of all triathlons. And then coming to Michigan, there was no Danskin. It wasn't, the series didn't happen there. And there were no women's triathlons. So I got together with my friend Sheila Termina, and we decided to put on the first all women's triathlon, and loved putting on races. At the time, I was a second grade teacher. But after a year of doing both, I realized it was probably best just to do one. So I left teaching and continued adding races. And here we are now. Actually, last year put on 0 races, but this year we're hoping for 14.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so tell us a little bit about you and your training. So a triathlete, what other activities and sports do you get involved with?
Well, I don't really participate in triathlon anymore. I haven't done one in quite a few years. I've got a lot of back issues, so I can't run anymore, and I can only bike for a limited amount of time. So now I walk and I swim and I bike and I cross country ski, and still stay active doing other things. But I did participate in triathlon for a long time. Started in 1995, I think was my first try. Before that, I was mostly just a runner. I ran a lot of marathons. And one year when I was injured, I started swimming because I couldn't run, and I really liked swimming. So then I thought, oh, maybe I can try a triathlon. So that's how I went from just running to doing triathlons.
That's awesome.
I did that for a long time until about 2 years ago. Had to stop.
Okay.
But the great thing is I love making them available to other people. So it's okay. I did it for a long time and found other things to do in the meantime, and just love introducing people to the sport. I think so many people say, oh, I'd love to try a triathlon. And they don't really even know exactly what that means, but it sounds cool and sounds like something that would be fun. And I just love making that available to people and giving them a good experience.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah, I can imagine a hard transition to get away from something you love, but if you can also kind of put that in front of people for the first time, or allow people to do that throughout Michigan and the area, I mean, it's pretty rewarding. So that's great.
Mhm.
What about so Epic Races, the team itself? It seems like I was looking through the website. I know I had a chance to meet Libby and saw a bunch of different people at the race this past weekend at Waterloo G&G. But can you tell us a little bit about the Epic Races team and some of the other events that you guys host?
Yeah, we have a great team. And, that's really what I think makes our events so amazing. As we've all heard, there's no I in team, and it's so true at Epic Races. Everybody gets their hands in whatever they need to. Everybody has their area that they're involved with race day, but when somebody sees something that needs to happen in an area that's not theirs, they have no trouble jumping right in and making whatever needs to happen so that the participants can have the best experience that they can. It was really interesting, this year is kind of like, getting the band back together, because after a year, while we have this great team race day, not everybody works behind the scenes. Libby does, and you got to meet her face to face. Libby and I have been working together in the office all year, organizing virtual races when we couldn't do live races. And it's a lot of interaction with participants, but all virtually, of course, and sending out a lot of swag and giving encouragement online. So we've been doing that together. But now when we all came out to the race, people who we've been, texting here and there, and we've had some Zoom meetings, but it was so great to literally get the band back together. And we have our course managers who are out there, Todd and Larry, and they were so great at keeping traffic controlled, making sure participants knew where to go. We have, I don't know if you had a chance to meet Elise. She's new on the team, and it's as though she's been here since the beginning. So that was very exciting. So shout out to Elise if she is listening. It was great to have her there. And this race being just a bike race was a little bit different, because people who would be in charge of the swim at a triathlon, really everyone was out on the bike course. Tammy was out on the bike course. And had her area, and we had Kathleen at registration, and Chris, who was also new on the team, doing health checks as people came on, something completely new. Who knew that was a job at races, that you need to do health screening as people arrive? And I rattled off a bunch of names, and I'm sure that I probably forgot somebody super important, but I don't have it all written in front of me right now. So, Cheryl handled all the food. Where we couldn't do post-race festivities, we call her director of post-race fun. Now she's just kind of like food, like brown bag. So she put together brown bags, and people took their food to go, which worked out pretty well.
So I think that's a perfect transition to talking about how some of the things have changed and people have almost fallen into somewhat different responsibilities. So from a safety and COVID standpoint, what are some of the things that went into this race and that you're seeing, maybe not just in Michigan, but throughout the country, that other race companies are adopting to make sure these races are safe for people?
Yeah, and everyone, of course, is doing it a little bit differently depending upon where they are in the country and, what their mandates are. What we have done to do what's really, comfortable for everybody in our area, as well as follow the mandates given to us, which keep changing. So we have really had to be fluid in our plan as we go along. Things have changed. But we had our pre-race meeting via Zoom, which was very different, but really actually pretty wonderful. And what's interesting is this is not the first time I had done a pre-race Zoom meeting. I didn't use Zoom, I used some other platform, but we have this race, the Battle of Waterloo, that is a 10-stage triathlon, and you keep your shoes with you the whole time. Really super fun, super cool event, but very different. So the last time we put it on in 2019, I decided I was going to have a pre-race meeting on whatever the online platform was. So I did that and thought I should do this for other races. This worked really well. And here we are now where I actually had to do it. But it was great. It gave people the opportunity to ask questions. When you do your pre-race meeting at the start line, it's kind of an awkward time for people to ask questions. So this way they were putting questions in the chat. Elise was monitoring the chat and we got to address everything. So that was very good. Unfortunately, we can't have spectators. And what was really wonderful was people were really following that. There was a 15-year-old in the race and his mom came up to me at the beginning outside our actual race venue where she couldn't come and said to me, where can I go that is safe to be able to watch him? Which was great, because even though we said no spectators, I kind of expected people to try to break those rules, but they didn't. Our check-in process was very different. We gave everybody a QR code and we were able to scan it with our phones as they arrived. So you scan it, they check in, and then we had all of their bags with their bibs and chips and all of that lined up far apart, and they would go find their number, the bag with their number, and there they are checked in, as opposed to anyone who's familiar with races knows you go there, you stand in line, you talk to somebody, and there's a lot of interaction there. So we were able to avoid that. We had hand sanitizer everywhere. And the health screening you can see in this photo here, that's actually Todd, who I mentioned, and I think that's Larry behind him, taking a temperature. And then we would have them walk through. We ended up not taking temperatures because it was cold in the morning and the thermometers weren't very accurate. So we skipped that. But we had a big sign with those questions. You know, we've all been asked those questions right now when we walk in a building. And you would read the questions. If you answer yes to any of those, then we need to ask you more and you may need to leave. But that went very smoothly. They had to wear masks when they weren't racing, and they did. It was, you know, you can see that in this photo, when they weren't racing, they had masks on their face, and they took them down when they started racing, put them on when they finished. It kept everybody comfortable. It was great. Start line, we really had to spread people out. That was challenging because on bikes, people really packed together. And a big part of the race is, you know, racing as part of your team, and they draft off of each other and they help each other and they take turns, you know, taking the pole. And when you have to spread out at the start, it makes it kind of hard to make that happen. But it worked. We did it. They all spread out and it worked beautifully.
And as you guys prepare for the upcoming races, are there already things that need to be changed or different than this one based on guidelines? Has anything changed since then, or is it things relatively the same?
Not yet. Right now, we are allowed to only have 300 people per race day. And the 300 people, that includes volunteers and staff. So participants, we capped it at 270 and had thin staff and thin volunteers, which is not ideal, but we did our best to make it work, and it worked. So we will continue with that. Our next race is the Island Lake Triathlon, which is June 5th. It's capped at 300 people. And because we know, of course, people are going to drop out and not show up, but we're full. I think we have 301 signed up right now. And we're going to keep everything the same. At this race, at the bike race, even though we typically don't have bike racks at this race, because for a bike race, it's not like a tri where you have to rack your bike, but we put them out to make sure it worked, and it did. So we'll have the bike racks and we'll put people's bags at their place, and yeah, we'll do it all the same. And the difference will be with your mask, you wear it and then you're getting in the water. Now, what do you do with your mask? So we're going to have Ziploc bags available and have people write their bib number on the bag, and they can then we're going to have a collection bin, collect all the masks, and then we can put it back at their transition area. So they'll have it when they finish.
Awesome. And I guess a big thing about these events is the community. I mean, spectators, athletes, all coming together at the same time. So what do you have to change moving forward in terms of, you talked about brown bags after, rather than having people sit around eating and hanging out? What are some of those changes, just the entire race atmosphere once they finish? That's kind of something you're focusing on.
That was something that for me felt like a huge bummer. But what's interesting is talking to people, they didn't notice really a whole lot. You know, for me, I make a huge effort to make sure the music's always going and there's always a flow of people, and you go here for this food and here for this food. And we have all these lines, and, you know, and we're flipping pancakes and, you know, and all this stuff going on. We didn't have that. But I think that the participants were just fine going and finding their brown bag of food, getting with their group, their pod of people who they can hang out with, finding a spot outside the official race venue and sitting and having a little picnic. They were very happy. From my perspective, because I'm meandering around and talking to everybody, it felt like it was really missing something because I couldn't do that in their groups, but the flow went really well, and people were very happy with it. So we had very positive feedback.
Yeah, and I can imagine at this point too, just being able to do in-person races, that people will probably be happy with whatever you give them, as long as they get out there and compete and have fun with some of their teammates and things. So
it's true. They just wanted to race, and we made that happen.
Yeah, that's awesome. So in terms of racing for first timers or people newer to anything, running, triathlon, biking, what are some things I guess people should have in mind or think about just to get the most from some of these events?
Well, I think, selecting the right race is super important, because there are a lot of races out there that are really geared to first timers or just first timer friendly. I mean, you're going to find all sorts of people at every race, but there are some races that focus more on the competition and some that focus more on finishing and having a good experience. So depending upon what you want to do, I think it's important to look and see, which is why I said, I really love women's only triathlon, because it can be very intimidating to women when they're at their first triathlon. And usually when it's a co-ed triathlon, a lot more men than women, and a lot of them are very serious about the racing, and it can be intimidating and overwhelming. So I think it's important to look around and see what races are out there for that. What was interesting last year, there were a lot of people who had signed up for Island Lake Tri, the one coming up. And when we canceled the live race and went virtual, they were kind of relieved, because we set up a situation where they could do a triathlon and they didn't really have to go. They could do it on their own time, and they could even choose a different course if they wanted to. So they were relieved, and they got, pun intended, their feet wet last year. And then this year, now they can participate in the live race, which will even be smaller because we can only have 300 people. So for a lot of first timers, that creates a very good experience for them. That said, I think there's nothing like a live race. I'm all for virtual racing when that's the only option, or for some reason that needs to be the option. But a live race experience, I think you can't get your endorphins going any other way than being at the live race and having the head-to-head competition like that. And when I say competition, I don't really mean competition, more camaraderie, being out there with a group of people all doing the same thing for the same goal is really special. That said, people get nervous. And some of the things that I tell people to do, make sure you do an open water swim before race day. You don't want that to be the first time ever that you are swimming in open water. And when you're there that day, go in the water, put your head under the water, look around and realize you really can't see anything anyway, and just get used to it, so that your first time having that experience is not when the gun goes off and you start racing. And those things make a huge difference. Just being familiar with it. When things feel familiar, it really is calming.
Mm-hmm. And so at this point, have you guys switched all the way to in person, or because I know we have some people that are on here right now that are from out of state. Do you have any virtual options currently still going on, or any of these races virtual and in person, or are they strictly in person?
All of the races have a virtual option. And actually that is something that we even did before any of this, before we had to have virtual races. We haven't offered virtual for every race, but we have offered virtual for a lot of races for probably 7 or 8 years now. Oh, wow. Mostly because somebody from out of state really wanted our Women Run the D medal. And they would call us, can I buy the medal? No, you can't buy a medal. You have to earn a medal. So we created the virtual race out of that.
That's awesome. That's good to know. I know we have a few people from Illinois and different places on here, so that's awesome to hear. And so in terms of triathlons, and you mentioned triathlons a few times today, just your passion throughout the years and some of the events that you put on. I think a lot of people here, mainly runners, and I've heard from a few clients alone this year saying, I would love to either do a triathlon at some point or I'm going to do it this year. Why do you feel like triathlons are a good next step for a lot of runners?
I think it's a natural next step for so many reasons. One, I shared my story when I was running a lot and was injured and I started swimming and I liked it. Let's put this to use, let's do something where I can use my swimming. And then when I got into it and my training was not running every day, but swimming, biking, and or running every day, I didn't get injured. I saw, a huge change in my strength, my overall strength, and not getting injured. And it's a great lifestyle. It's getting that multi-sport lifestyle. You can't compare that to single sport. Swimming is usually the biggest barrier for people, but a good way to figure that one out is come out and do a duathlon. It's run, bike, run. And then you're there and you see all these people getting in the water and you realize if they can do that, I can do that. And I see that a lot. My husband, who I've been married to for just about 31 years now, when we first met, he said, I'm going to learn to swim this year. And that was in 1986. And he didn't learn to swim that year. And he didn't learn to swim the next year or the next year. And every year he'd say, I'm going to learn to swim this year. And 2 years ago, he decided he was going to do a half Ironman, but he didn't know how to swim. And he learned how to swim 2 years ago at, how old was he? I don't know, 53 years old. And he set his mind to it and did it. And he did the half Ironman, and he couldn't do it last year because nobody did last year, but he signed up again this year as well. So point is, it can be done. I think that it's just, as far as training and racing and health and strength, it's just a great sport.
Yeah, that's awesome. It sounds like your husband waited to the last minute to jump in, but I'm glad he did. So,
yeah, exactly. And he wanted to, but like a lot of people want to. So.
Right. So in terms of distances, because I think sometimes we see different things on TVs and we think, okay, I can't do that. I mean, it sounds like there's a range of different distances and things right now that really fits everyone, like running 5K to ultra marathon. So can you explain the differences between some of these distances?
Yeah. And, and on that, so many people would say to me over the years, do you do real triathlons? So, what do they mean by real triathlon? A triathlon is swimming, biking, and running. And that's what a triathlon is. And the distance it matters because it matters when you got to know what you're doing. But, someone can be a triathlete and do any distance. People get very hung up and overwhelmed when they hear about the Ironman. Which is long, which is a 2.4 mile swim and a 112 mile bike and a marathon, a 26.2 mile run. That's a lot. That's a long way to go. And the hardest part of that is the training. The training, it's almost like, having an additional job, like it's a part-time job. It's a lot of time. Half Ironman is half of that. And for people who are familiar with, marathons and half marathons, where a marathon is really more than double a half marathon, kind of the same thing. It's a half Ironman is achievable without having a part-time job of training, still a fair amount of training, but you can do, a few a year and much, I don't want to say easier, neither easy, but more manageable into your life. An Olympic distance, which is also called international distance, that's what would be in the Olympics, and it's the international distance, is a 1.5K swim, a 40K bike, and a 10K run. And those, you don't find a lot of those. We do have one, our Island Lake Tri, which is coming up on June 5th, offers an Olympic distance. A sprint is anything less than an Olympic. People usually think that it's like an 800-meter swim, maybe like a 12 or 14-mile bike and a 5K run, because that's kind of a typical distance. But really, it can be anything less. We have our Ann Arbor Tri, which is a sprint distance, but it has a 5-mile trail run. So totally unique platform there, where we have, it's an 800-meter swim. I think it's a 14-mile bike, but this 5-mile run, it's a long run. It's a hard run, but it is a sprint. And we also offer mini sprint. Some people call that super sprint, and that's even shorter. Usually like a 400-meter swim, maybe a 10-mile or so bike, and like a 2-mile run, or even less, 1.5-mile run. And that's a great way to see what it's all about. And usually when people finish those, they're like, okay, can I do another one right now? They feel so good after doing it, and they've gotten rid of that anxiety of the unknown, not knowing what a triathlon is really like.
Right. And so in terms of gear too, because obviously if we compare that to running, there's more that you need to do this. But if we're just kind of starting triathlon for the first time, do we need to get fancy on a special bike or anything like that?
Not at all, especially for one of the shorter distances. You do not need any special bike. For anything with maybe a 10-mile bike or so, any bike will do. I recommend a bike that maybe has some gears. You can shift some gears, something you're comfortable on, something that's safe. But we see people out there at our Tri Goddess Tri, people with mountain bikes and hybrids. They even borrow their kids' bikes sometimes. That said, you get there and you just have to be confident in your bike, because you are going to see people with super fancy bikes with aero bars and, special helmets and just all decked out, but it's not necessary. It is more comfortable for the longer distances and makes it more manageable when you have that sort of equipment. But for a sprint distance, you can have just a swimsuit or a tri-suit. You can see in this bottom photo, actually there's a couple photos here, the 3 women, they're wearing tri-suits. So it's special shorts that you can swim, bike, and run in, and same with the top. And then the woman running and the guy behind her, they also are wearing tri-suits. That's really the most comfortable thing to wear, because you just leave it on the whole time. And then of course a bike helmet is mandatory. You need to have that.
Awesome. And so in terms of the events that you guys have this year, do you guys host all of these distances, or do you kind of specialize in specific ones?
The longest we currently host is Olympic. We had a women's only half. Ironman is a brand name, so we didn't have a half Ironman. We had a half, 70.3. Actually, that's brand also, but we had a half distance, all women. And we don't do that anymore. We now focus on mostly sprint and mini sprints with the one Olympic distance. But then we also have, that I mentioned earlier, the Battle of Waterloo, which is it's a long race. And I'm trying to remember how many, it's 42 miles total, but that's swimming, biking, and running. So like 25 miles of that is biking, but it's run, bike, run, swim, run, bike, run. Super, super fun. You need to keep your shoes with you the whole time. So you have to figure out how to do that on the swim. People have all sorts of ways they do it. Really fun. And that's a longer, more challenging event.
That sounds awesome. That sounds fun for sure. And so as we begin to wrap up here, and if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop a question in the chat right now. We'll make sure that we get to that as we wrap up. So in terms of people, obviously epicraces.com, where people can get in touch with you, do you guys do a lot through social media where they can keep up with different races and events?
Yes, we do. Our Facebook page is Epic Races. Some of the races have their own pages, but those are mostly active leading up to the race. So the Epic Races Facebook page and Instagram page are the best. We've been trying to do more on LinkedIn. So we have that. We have a mailing list which you can sign up for on our website. So at epicraces.com, we send out a lot of emails. And yeah, we've got a fun season ahead of us from these triathlons that I've talked about, a lot of 5Ks, our Goddess racing series. We have a series of women's only races. and the Ann Arbor Marathon, which normally would have happened in March, but it's happening in October this year.
Okay, that's awesome. And so Tammy asks, for the Battle of Waterloo, how does your bike catch up to you, or do you go back to the same transition area?
That's such a good question. That's a great question. We have 2 transition areas. So you start off running and then you hop on your bike and then you bike to another transition area, which people think is so cool because they're biking and then they show up somewhere and, oh, look at this, there's bike racks. It's a whole new transition area. You rack your bike there, and from there you swim, run, swim, run, swim, run through 3 different lakes, but then end up back at that same place and then ride your bike back to where you started. So the first ride, you take the long way there, it's 20 miles, but coming home, we show everyone the shortcut. It's 5 miles to get back to the first transition area.
That's awesome. That sounds fun. And so with these races right here coming up this year, actually, Tammy said, sounds so cool. So maybe you might get her involved in that one this year.
Yeah, it is. Cool.
With the races coming up this year, are there certain ones that are I know it's hard to say it this way because everything's limited in terms of capacity, but are there certain ones that are more of your bigger races that you either per season or per month every year that you're usually doing to a greater extent, or are they all pretty much cut down now just due to COVID?
But this year they all have to max 300 people. So, and so it really depends on the venue where we're hosting, but most of them are at the state parks, and the state parks are having us cap it at 300 people. Hopefully by the Ann Arbor Marathon, that won't be the case because we have over 1,000 people signed up right now. So we're hoping that by October that changes. That's what happened with this bike race. We had over 400 people signed up and we were told we could have 300. So we made it a 2-day event. So we do what we can to accommodate. We don't want to tell anybody, sorry, everyone else can race, but you can't. So we will figure it out. And for now, though, registration's open and they're all capped at 300 people for now. We have an open water swim event, a 5K and a 10K open water swim. That usually has 800 people. And that's the cap, but that's going to be 300 as well for now. Maybe that can change by August. We'll see.
Right, hopefully. And so another question, do you ever host any events outside of Michigan?
No, and that's part of our mission is, is bringing events to Southeastern Michigan. That's what we do. That's our specialty.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I don't have any other questions here. So I just want to say thank you. We appreciate you taking the time. Thanks to everyone else that had a chance to watch here, hopefully on your lunch break from work. But Eva, thank you for joining us on the Fireside Chat. And if anyone has any specific questions for her, you can go to epicraces.com, check out some of the races, send them a message directly if there's anything else that you want to get, you feel like we didn't touch on today. But I just want to say thank you and I hope you guys have a great rest of your week.
All right. Thank you so much, Garrett. This was great.
Thanks, Eva. I'll talk to you soon. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks. Bye.